All right, welcome back. The Brittney Griner detention saga has unleashed several priceless takes from the media that have absolutely nothing to do with what really happened in Russia and the trade and everything else. None other than this one was better than from far-left MSNBC. If it weren't for a maddening pay disparity, Brittney Griner almost certainly would not have been in Russia. So yes, the left is outraged that female basketball players don't all make $10, $20 million a year. Brittney Griner was making well over $200,000 a year in the United States. Apparently that's not enough for the standards at MSNBC. And they're blaming that as the reason for why this happened. Now, it is true that Griner was in Russia because she can make $1 million playing basketball, but that's really not here nor there. Profit loss, revenue, meaningless to these people when you look at it. The WNBA loses close to $10 million every single year. It only generates about $70 million in revenue, $60 million in revenue. It costs $70 million to run it. It generates $60 million in revenue, so they lose $10 million every single year that they run the WNBA. The NBA, on the other hand, generates $8 billion in revenue, and the NBA already just gifts the WNBA $15 million every single year just to keep them afloat so that they can keep playing in this league that doesn't generate much interest at all in this country. Without that, the $15 million from the NBA, the players would be making teacher salaries, maybe less. Former pro baller Royce White joins us tonight to talk a little bit about this. It's good to have you on, sir. I'm just so confused. I mean, everybody is obsessed with this money story about how it's not a fair deal in the WNBA. I wanted to get your thoughts on that.
My thoughts are it's just a bait and switch, right? I mean, your MSNBCs, the CNNs, the entire liberal establishment media are just trying to find ways not to have to talk about the reality. And the reality is we're in a war we shouldn't be in. We're in a war we shouldn't be in with the country with some ex-KGB boys that aren't playing around. And when you go to a war with a country with some people who aren't playing around and you let your citizens mosey on over like it's a normal calendar year, they end up getting detained and you end up getting a bad deal to trade back in that detainment. Now, with that being said, I do think that we should have fought to get her back. I think we should fight to get every citizen back.
I totally agree.
I think we got a bad deal because we have bad leadership. But I don't want to use that to try and legitimize the rule of law in Russia, right? Because, and we could talk about our rule of law here as well in this context, because for me, when they traded back for the spy, it kind of proves the theory that her treatment or her detainment was politically motivated. I mean, if you really believe in the rule of law, you don't trade back on principle. It's like the principle's the principle. So we're not trading for her at all if it was real, but it's not real. We're in an international espionage conflict with multiple nations, and Russia's one of them, have been for a long time.
Yeah. I mean, you're exactly right about that. I do think that there is some legitimacy. When the administration says that they had no choice but to take Griner, that Whelan was off the table, and then you've got Russia saying, I mean, and not to say that anything they say is credible, because it's usually not, but they do indicate that Whelan was on the table. And then you start to wonder. I mean, from a political standpoint, Griner is much more valuable to an administration that is obsessed with race and sexuality and gender than a guy like Paul Whelan.
Well, absolutely. And I think if we had the choice, we should have brought Whelan home first. I'm not sold that Whelan was on the table. I would love for somebody in the media to have the integrity to stand up and ask, was Whelan actually on the table?
Well, they ask, and the White House denies it. But it's interesting that, the White House lies, like all White Houses do. And you got the Russians saying that he was on the table.
Well, that's the problem when you got a bunch of liars, right, all around the table. And look, the Russians, look, here's my take on it. The Russians were going to give us who they wanted to give us. And the Russians had a premeditated story about how this deal was going to go down, because these people are experts and masters in psychological subversion. They know how our media behaves. They know the narratives that are running, and they know how to press the buttons to make our leaders look bad, which they already do look bad because they're incompetent. So it's a twofer.
It is something else. I mean, one of the most dangerous people that's ever walked the earth just went right back to Russia, and he's still, he looks like he's in his 50s. He can still do a lot of damage, and we're in the middle of a proxy conflict with Russia right now. You can't make it up.
No doubt.
Yeah. Royce White,
No
hey,
doubt.
thank you so much for coming on. We appreciate it.
Godspeed, brother.